Hi there, my name is Terry. Welcome to this special edition of 5 Minute Velo. Today is the 14th of February 2023. This date is significant to me because it's 5 years ago today that I suffered a posterior circulatory ischemic stroke. In this video I briefly want to tell the story of what happened to me on that day and also go through in very simple terms what happened to my brain. In future videos I'll talk about how I recovered from that stroke, how my symptoms have evolved over those 5 years, and what I'm doing to adapt myself and my equipment to the realities of having a problem with my brain. So what happened on that fateful morning? Remember, it was the 14th of February. That is Valentine's Day. And what I'm going to describe to you now is my gift on that day to my wife. I woke up relatively early in the morning, probably around about 7 o'clock, feeling rather unwell. I had a very dizzy head, although dizzy is probably not the correct word. It was more about disequilibrium. I also later started vomiting and feeling very, very unwell. My wife called 111. After a little while, they decided to call an ambulance. The paramedics came in and started looking at me. First of all, they started to take a look at my heart. They put an ECG on me, took heart traces, didn't find any problems there. They then started doing some other testing relating to the way I was perceiving the world. So they were asking me to move my feet around, whether I could follow their fingers, etc. And much of that I could do, but I was still feeling very unwell, and I started vomiting more and more. Eventually, they decided that I needed to go to hospital. So they put me in the ambulance and took me off to Addenbrooke's Hospital, where I was taken into the emergency department. Almost immediately, I had several doctors and nurses gather around me, and they started doing similar tests to the paramedics, particularly focusing on my heart and whether that was working correctly or not. Again, there was lots of finger following and toe wiggling going on. At that stage, I really wanted to go to the toilet, but I couldn't, so they fitted a catheter. And later on, I was taken up for a CT scan. Back to the emergency department, and probably around about an hour later, a doctor came to talk to me and said that they thought that I had had a stroke, although the CT scan wasn't very clear because the area that my stroke may have taken place in was very close to my spinal column, and that was obscuring the CT scan. So they decided to do an MRI scan, which is much more detailed and distinguishes the different structures in the body much better. In the meantime, I was taken up and put in a ward. Later on in the day, a doctor came up to me and described what they'd seen in that MRI scan. And basically what had happened is what I'll describe next.
What precipitated my stroke, I don't know, and I probably never will. However, anatomically the problem stemmed from one of my vertebral arteries. Somehow the artery on the left-hand side of my vertebral column received some damage. The damage resulted in a clot build-up, and eventually the clot gave way. It made its way through the cerebellum, where eventually it stopped blood supply getting to that part of my brain. As far as we can tell, I've lost about half of the neurons in my cerebellum.
I should say that all strokes are different. For instance, my stroke took place at the back of my brain, not the front, and therefore my symptoms will be very different to somebody that had a stroke related to a different area of the brain. Also, my symptoms may not be representative of other people that have had posterior circulatory ischemic strokes.
I've taken my brain out to show you which parts have been affected. Don't worry, I'll put it back later. Most strokes affect this top part of the brain, the cerebellum. However, in my case, the part that was affected was the cerebellum, here. Although it looks like quite a small part of the brain, it actually contains between 30 and 40% of all of your neurons. It's densely packed with neurons so it can work quickly. As far as medical science can tell, the cerebellum's a sort of coordinating centre. It feeds back and controls non-thoughtful activity. In the context of this video, something like riding a bike is a non-thoughtful activity. You learn how to do the thing and then you don't have to think about it. The cerebellum also seems to take information from your thoughtful brain, your cerebellum, and integrates it with the information it's getting from the rest of your surroundings and body. For instance, what you want to say is a thoughtful activity that comes from your cerebellum. However, saying it, that is the coordination of the movement of all your muscles, is a non-thoughtful activity that's carried out by the cerebellum. In my case, finding the correct words is often difficult, and even when I do find the right words, I can forget it, or verbally trip over those words. This is one reason why the dialogue on my videos may sometimes seem a bit disjointed. Anyway, let's get back to cycling. When I'm riding, I principally have two inputs, visual and tactile, movements coming through the pedals, saddle and steering. As best I can understand it, and believe me, I don't, the remains of my cerebellum cannot process these information, so my cerebrum tries to take over. However, the cerebrum is very slow, and if too much information comes at me all at once, I can't really make sense of it quickly enough. For instance, if I'm going down a hill where the road has dappled sunlight on it, it confuses me, and things are made worse if the road surface is bumpy. Going fast down hills can be very tricky for me. The less busy the environment and the smoother the roads, the easier it is for me to go faster. Now these are things I can't really explain. I can see the environment I'm riding through, I can feel the road through the handlebars and the saddle, but I just can't make sense of them. And because my brain can't make sense of them, it can't tell my body what to do. The only thing my thoughtful brain can do is say, slow up. So I do. Anyway, that, in simple terms, as best I can understand it, is what is happening with my brain.
In my next video, I'll talk about my recovery and my ongoing symptoms, and how those have evolved over the 5 years. From me, until that next video, it's goodbye.